start the recording. We do have 2 o'clock here Eastern, so we'll go ahead and get things kicked off just to be respectful of everyone's time. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Weller. I'm the IT Support Services Community Group Lead, and I'll be the moderator for today. I'd like to welcome you all to the group presentation, Models for Incident Categorization, Experiences with Identifying and Implementation. Just a few quick housekeeping items. We are in a webinar format here, so everyone will be on mute. I do want to ask that you please, if you have questions, use the QA window. You should see that at the bottom of your Zoom session. If you do submit a question, please go ahead and include your name and institution, just so that whenever we review the questions at the end, we'll be able to know who. So this webinar is being recorded, and we'll be hosting it on the ITSM community group wiki. We hope should have that up within 5 business days after we conclude our session today. Each person, excuse me, will present for roughly 15 minutes. Once our presentation is concluded, we'll open it up for questions, and so at that point, I'll go back through the QA pod. If you want to hang out toward the end, after we do our QA, the presenters will be hanging out for around 30 minutes for sort of a special in-depth QA, just to dig a little bit deeper if anybody wants to do so. So we're extremely honored to have with us today 3 service management professionals. We have joining us from Penn State University, Mike Morris. He's the Enterprise Change Manager. Also joining us is, from the University of California, Kent Carpenter from UC Merced. He's the IT Director for Service Management and the Project Management Office. And also joining us is Steve Shanks from the Ohio State University, where Steve's an ITSM business analyst. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Mike, who's going to kick off our presentation. And after the last question here, I'll go ahead and move into QA. So, Mike.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Just want to start out by giving a little opinion. We're all in here gathering information about categorization systems or just categorization in general. And in my opinion, good categorization in IT service management is a key data component that drives most, if not all, continuous improvement. I'm pretty sure we can all agree to that statement, but what exactly is a good categorization system? Well, if you just look at categorization as a whole, a good categorization system records information on events that allows granular and concise view of related data. So with that definition, there's no cookie cutter solution, as each university or company has different needs, different goals, different things that they hold valuable. So before we get started, first off, a little background on me and the way I view things. So my background is in service management, more to the point, outsourced service management. So as an outsourced service delivery manager, it was my job to ensure a great experience for my customers and a streamlined support offering for my client. In order to do that, I rely heavily on historical data. And going into some of my engagements, that historical data just wasn't there. So what we would lack going into that would be things like seasonal incident, top contact drivers, first call resolution statistics, or relational data between services. So all this is very important when you're trying to drive service improvement, because you got to know where you are before you can put together a plan of where you want to be. So with that, what I would introduce is a method called CTSA. Some might be familiar with it. It's category, type, service, and activity. And these are fields that you would fill out in the record. Now, the way to launch this, the easiest way to launch this is work with multiple departments and just really go through everything that you're servicing and start putting these into these categories. Now let's talk about these categories for a minute. The first one being category is just a high level of what you're working on or what you're doing, whether it be an application, the campus network, or a personal computer. And then as you get further down in, you start answering questions. Okay, we take application. What type of application are we talking about? So now you get into your type categorization. Well, what kind of application was it? Well, it was Adobe. You know, what kind of campus network was it? Well, it was the wired network. What kind of personal computer are we talking about? Well, it's just PC hardware is what we're dealing with. Then you answer the service question. Now, whenever you're thinking of service, we all immediately go to service offering. But think of service as what you are servicing, the thing itself. If you're mature enough, you're talking about a CI. But if you're going CTSA, then you're talking about the thing itself. So under Adobe, well, what is the service under Adobe? Well, it's Adobe Connect. Under wireless network, well, what is that service? Well, that service is faceplate, you know, the thing that you hook into the wall. You know, under PC hardware, well, what is that service? Well, the service or the thing you're working on is the hard drive. So now you have your category, your type, and your service. Now you answer the what did you do or what do you need to do in activity. So again, we'll go back to Adobe Connect. What did you have to do? Well, I had to activate, set up, or install an instance of Adobe Connect. The faceplate, what did I have to do? Well, I had to move, add, change. The user wanted fiber in the room. Right now there's only Cat5 present, so we had to make a change. For the hard drive, what did I have to do with that hard drive? Well, I had to troubleshoot and repair that hard drive. So this gives you a very granular approach to looking at your, not only your ticketing volume, but everything through ITSM that uses this categorization. So with that, you can start trending at a very granular level and start looking at things differently as far as the information that's coming in. And this will drive continuous improvement efforts like in higher education, new student move-in comes to mind. This is something that happens year over year. It's not going to stop. You're always going to have it. Okay, let's look at the trending in that, and let's see what we can do to, you know, strengthen the knowledge around what is usually asked of our support centers or our support personnel, and make sure that they have those tools available to them, and make sure that they're refreshed and the support effort is fresh in their minds to where they can tackle this head on. Final week, same thing. We always know what's going to happen. Let's, you know, we can use this data trending to ensure that everybody is trained up, that we have the information out there, that knowledge is in place, and we can really drive continuous improvement through the user experience. You can also do that with first call resolution or first contact resolution, however you measure it, by identifying the things that are getting escalated, whether it be a hierarchy escalation or escalated, you know, outside of the support group. You can start to identify those things and then start building knowledge and access, if applicable, around that support item to really drive that project. And with that categorization, you know, you have the tools necessary to identify where your biggest opportunities are and where your you know, your low-hanging fruit or your quick wins are. So that allows you to evolve to a future state. Now many people use a CMDB, many people don't. So a configuration management database contains, of course, configuration items. And whenever you evolve to that level, you would actually, in this model, you would actually replace type with service. So you're getting rid of the type because you no longer need it. You're still keeping to the service, and then the next level you have this configuration item. Your configuration item is the thing itself. It is all the way down to naming that router, naming that computer, naming whatever item that you're working on. That way you have data to where you can do things like mean time between failures. You can cross the bridge and go into asset management and hardware refreshes and things of that nature. So with this structure, with the CTSA structure, and the reason that I wanted to present it is I've seen a lot of universities that use something similar, but with CTSA, whenever you're starting out with it, I mean, that's where all the work is up front, and then you benefit, tremendously going forward. So anyway, and that kind of all just wraps around into, there is no real cookie cutter solution. There's nothing that's going to work for everybody. But whenever you're looking at support implementations, I've done several, and CTSA just really allowed me and my support staff a very granular level of insight and a very intuitive way to manage categorization. All right, well, I hope this was informative, and I will answer questions at the end of the presentation. I'll hand it back to Ryan.
Awesome, thanks, Mike. So look, next up we have, I'm going to turn it over to Kent, who is going to talk a little bit more about incident categorization. Kent?
Well, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Kent Carpenter. I'm at UC Merced in Central California, if you're not familiar with where that is. We are a brand new university. We started in 2005 with the first graduating class in 2009, and we'll be approaching about 11,000 students come 2020. So we've been expanding rapidly. It's been exciting being here. Categorization. So I've been at some very large companies, Prudential, Progressive, Pearson, Education, implemented several instances of CRM categorization. So I've had a lot of experience around this. My biggest thing that I kind of, tell people is like, we're all community, we're all higher ed, we're here for each other. So I encourage you guys, after the fact, keep our names, reach out to us later. If at some point you're about to embark on the categorization process, and there's a lot of experience out there, and it's good to kind of tap into it if you need some different perspectives. Some of this is going to be a repeat to what Mike said, and probably Steve, but Mike had some really good points in there. Why we classify? So it's for ticket routing is what we're looking for here at UC Merced. So we have a lot of different technologies that we support in our service desk teams. They're generalist, and they don't know everything. So we try to help them, right? So based on the categorization and what we select in the ticket, we can have an assignment group routing to help them out and try to figure out where things need to go. So that's really important. Prioritization, there might be certain types of selections in the category. Where I've come from, it's been a category type and item, so not the same as CTSA. So based on the category type and item, could be something that's very critical based on how it's populated, and you might want to give it a different prioritization. There might be situations where it's a network port issue, Wi-Fi issue. So based on what you select as a categorization, you might, if it gets down to a Wi-Fi configuration, you might pre-populate the ticket with a template that, the network team would need that information to troubleshoot it some more. So those are kind of some of the things you could do assigning the tickets or fields within the form, incident form. Reporting is huge. We need data. We need data to make really good decisions, to figure out what's going on. Report just basically ticket volume. Where is it being generated? There's an aspect of problem management in reporting. Why are certain devices failing, right? Why are we, with new students coming on board and hooking up into the dorms, is there some technology that's causing them issues, right? And that's kind of around problem management. Trend analysis. When I used to work at a company, every summer there was a part of the company that released all their new code, and we would just slam our customers, right, in this 3-month period. And it's like we'd have long wait times, and customers just complain. And the question is, why are we doing that to our customers, right? We are here for our customers to make sure that we're taking care of them. So we did the trend analysis. We went back to that division and say, you cannot be doing this going forward. You need to spread out your releases throughout the year. You got to bring down that hill of the impact that you're creating on your customers and the service desk. So trend analysis is key, and that's tied to reporting. SLAs as well. You might have certain types of tickets that have a different type of SLA assigned to it. So there's lots of different things you can do and have the classification work for you. Okay. UCMR said there's a concept called service ownership. The EDUCAUSE group, this group actually came out. There was not this group, but there was an ECAR came out on service ownership and what that is. Service ownership is not just looking at a service. I'm giving somebody access to Microsoft Outlook, but owning Microsoft products and all the technologies or all the support mechanisms, inputs and outputs in supporting that service, right? So that's the model that we have here. So I say that because when we're rolling out a new technology, right now we're doing multi-factor authentication, I want the service owner of that service to see and touch those tickets that are being generated off of multi-factor, so they can look at those daily and make adjustments to FAQs, knowledge articles, or other communications. So it's important to have that element and tying that into the service ownership piece of it. So I recommend that you guys look at the paper, and if you don't know what service ownership, it's something to look at within an organization. And then the service owner would own some of the trend analysis, as I kind of mentioned. You can go ahead to the next slide, that's fine. I'm going to talk more of the processes versus the implementation of this category type and item, or the CTSA. I've always looked at the categorization as the holy grail. It's not an easy thing depending on the size of your organization, right? So the campus here is relatively small. I can make some easy decisions on how we're going to set up the categorization on how we're organized, right? But you get into large organizations, and there's hundreds of different departments across the company, and they're all using categorization. To get agreement across the board, it's not that easy. So the next thing to talk about is more of the governance model around that. So how is it you're going to set up your categorization is key. And with that, you have to answer a question of, what am I trying to get out of categorization? As an organization, you need to answer, what is it you're trying to solve? What information are you trying to resolve and get out of that categorization? So that's key. So once you know what it is you're trying to do with the categorization, then you can start thinking about the governance, right? Who do I need to set up on a committee to come up and structure the categorization, category type and item? So that's going to be important. I'm going to say try to keep it small. You might have a high-level small meeting and then a larger group committee down below. The check, maybe it's a check and balance kind of or structure that you have. But governance is important. I mentioned before, the maturity and the size of the organization is also critical, because it's your new organization. You want to just get something in place to get some basic categorization captured. Then, if you have a mature organization, you want to deep dive into some of these reportings much more in a larger organization where you can have that capability. So you got to keep those into maturity and size and consideration. I mentioned before, keep your final result in mind. What are you trying to get out of the categorization and setting that whole thing up? I'm going to recommend you don't make it too simple. because you really want to make sure the data works for you, and then don't make it overly complicated. So you're really spending all your time kind of developing this category type and item and never get anywhere or have a final product. So just some word of cautions there. Do not base it on an org chart. Modeling is very important. Mike was talking about historical data. You have, if you're upgrading your incident form, the categorization, you might have a model already, but you're going to be updating it. Base it a lot off of the historical tickets that are in there. They kind of help you guide and set up the structure for the categorization. And then once you set up your categorization, it's important to sample the verification. And what I mean by that is you have, like I said, the governance, you have the high-level committee kind of defining with the categorization, but then you have involvement with your different organizations to say, here's what we come up with. We need you to pull a sample report, random report of tickets that you guys have been submitting and handling. Now take those tickets and model it, manually put it into the new model, make sure it's going to fit, make sure the model is going to work, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's going to be important. So once you go live or once you're implementing and training people, it's got to make sense and it's got to work all the way through. I'm jumping to the next section. Is the traditional. I have the category type and item is kind of a traditional structure for classification. With that is the structure is a noun, noun, verb, right? It's a PC, it's a keyboard, and it's broken, right? That's your noun, noun, verb. Very simple. In my environment, that works very well. We have not implemented a CMDB yet. We have not gone that far yet. That's why I say you have to look at the maturity of your organization to see, okay, how far do you really want to take it? So noun, noun, verb, it could be category type and item. The CTSA model's fairly familiar with that. And I've seen that structure, that's why I call this kind of a holy grail. I've seen the structure of the noun, noun, verb get very complicated. Is it hardware? Is it PC? And what is the error? There's different models of how that can be set up. So be careful with that, and again, understand what you're trying to solve with the categorization. Let's go to the next page. I'm not going to spend a lot on the alternative. When I was starting to go into Remedy, another CRM, I think it was version 7, they had, instead of having the 3 fields for categorization, they had 6 fields. So I'm only representing a different model to you as an alternative. And the 6 fields were based on hardware specs, and then the other 3 fields were more of the cause and effect, what is really happening with that. So not saying it's good or bad, just again, what is it you're trying to get out of categorization? I would say in mature service management organizations, you might go for more categories than less. With this model here with the 6 different fields, it's more clicks, but you can get into much better, richer reporting out of introducing more fields around that. And we'll go to the next screen. Last slide for me, just some other things to consider when embarking on the categorization. This one's obvious, but it always sneaks in when you're building a model, is the other category. So recommendations are to avoid the other category like the plague. There is one exception. UC Merced is actually going live with a new categorization model come this Friday. So I avoided other as much as I could. In the configuration items in the CMDB where we house the software applications, I am allowing a other category simply because I'm applying the 80-20 rule. I don't care about the other, the minutia of the applications that are out there. We're populating software in the CI section. And then in that area, I'm going to have an other. But it's going to be important for me that if I do have an other, then I'm going to watch that carefully to see over time if it's being used for other applications I'm not aware of. And then if it's a large target, of an application, I'll make sure I do add it to CI so I can start tracking it more definitively. Again, I mentioned before the hands-on validation against existing tickets before you go implement. Once you come up with a model and before you implement, you want to really test out the categorization against historical tickets is important. And then with the different departments that are going to be using the same model, make sure they're in there, give them a sample set of tickets, and make sure they can find the right categorization based on their previous tickets. Then fourth bullet here, documentation, training, and rollout. Critical. You want to document, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and this is just more for process in the back end. And it's documentation, how to fill out an incident ticket. Why do you pick these selections? How does category drive type drive the item, the subcategories? You need to come up with a training program, right? What does that look like? Training. Is it going to be webinars? Is it going to be stored webinars? Is it going to be documentation? So you have to have that into consideration. And implementing new categorization is a big deal if you're changing the model, right? Because it's all about change. If you have hundreds of people using categorization and all of a sudden you change it on them, they're going to be upset. They're not going to be able to find things. So you really have to kind of understand your rollout and how it's going to affect your customers and how you're going to help them adopt the new categorization. And then the last bullet I have is monitor after implementation. How are things going, right? I mentioned the service ownership model before. Take a look at the tickets that are being generated, right? Maybe for the first several weeks you work with the service desk and have an extra flag on the incident form that there was some confusion around how to classify tickets, or customers didn't know what to do when they fill out the web form for an incident. So it's important to monitor. It could be in reports. It could be checking in with the service desk. Could be reporting into your governance team. But I think that's going to be very important to make some quick adjustments and adopt what's happening. Okay, I think that's it on my slides. We have this slide in here. Some of the challenges: no clear direction on why and outputs of categorization. You make sure you really understand your model, the maturity of your organization, and what you're trying to achieve. Okay, very important. Understand what information derived from incident categories will be of benefit to your environment based on your resources. There are multiple ways to set up incident categories, validate and categorization models. Doesn't provide the outputs that were initially identified. So just a validation of exactly what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, that's it for me. I'm going to hand it over to Steve.
Thanks. So I'm probably going to say some of the similar things. For example, I'm going to bring up the other category, which I love that you brought that up. I also love that Mike brought up the academic calendar as well, because when you're looking at the academic calendar, of course, we have those different times throughout the course of the year that can impact our decision making. But as you said, my name's Steve. I'm with The Ohio State University. Just going to give you a little bit of background on what my perspective might be from some of this, as I work very, very closely with our developers on our service knowledge management system, so where we track incidents and do changes and all things like that. So you might see me kind of being a little bit closer to dealing with that. So just want to give some people a heads up that might be where you're seeing me lean. So with what I want to get into a little bit with the way we're handling things now at Ohio State and the Office of the Chief Information Officer, is that a lot of what we're doing presently is informed by the service design process. And what I mean by that is that throughout the service design process, we start really defining some of the different things that we might want to capture when we're doing incident categorization. So for example, you'll see that one of the things we like to capture is the service provider. Now, the OCIO uses this ticketing system, but there are other areas inside of the university that also use the same system. So we definitely want to parse out like what's ours, what's theirs. And so we have things like the Office of the Chief Information Officer, Education, Human Ecology. They're their own service provider. The Office of Distance Education and E-Learning. These are all the different service providers. Now, underneath each one of those service providers, they each have their own category, or another way to look at it would be a line of business or product types. An example that we could use for that is under that category, we would have something like messaging and collaboration. So when we're looking at a service, it's got its provider, it's got its category, and then underneath that category or product type line of business, we would have the specific services. And with those services defined, we're able to say, you know, maybe this is something about, if I'm looking at a category like messaging and collaboration, this is specific towards our mailing list service, or this is specific towards our student email service, or our faculty and staff email service. So we're starting to capture those things that we really captured in our service design phase. But another things that this allows us to do for us is things like we have an SLA associated with that service. That service can be defined as internal or external. So maybe it's not a service that can necessarily be seen or even subscribed to see on our system status pages. So there are some definitions there that it really helps us define those things. Of course, we also have a descriptor, which is just some very simple terminologies, and we're going to come back to this a little bit later, which talks about things like this is a connectivity issue, it's functionality, degradation. Those are pretty generic, and again, I want to talk about that here in just a few. Other pieces that we do when we're defining our service is that we associate the assignment group with that service, or the support group that's defined for each of these services. So I can open a record for the service. I might have an assignment group for the very original, so the people working on that record, and maybe it's our first, our first line, which would be our service desk, but they know, hey, this service has a functional escalation to this other assignment group, and that would have been defined during that service design period. Now, then there's this great thing called impact and urgency and priority, very ITIL mathematics, I guess you would say there. But one of the pieces that we do here is we also define during our service design thing, you're going to hear me say service design so much, but during service design, we've defined, does that service have any P1s or P2s, priority 1 or priority 2 incidents? And what that helps us out with is, hey, this can let us know when to perform a hierarchical escalation if senior leadership needs to be involved. So a lot of what we see, again, on those that categorization of our incident records as we define it and we get the information about that ticket that's turned in is, again, defined in service design, and then we end up finding out that we can fill in a lot of this information and route it. Now, on the next slide, I want to talk a bit more about these things because there's a process, and one of the greatest things about processes is that it's repeatable, and you can repeat it, and you can repeat it, and you can repeat it, and then what started as a good process is very quickly found to be lacking, and that can happen with a single question. For example, if I show somebody this chart, there's that big blue spot, that biggest spot, and someone might ask me, what are those? And I can say, well, the service that we've defined it as, the service that we've put it under, I can even tell you who all those were assigned to and who took care of them. But the service that we put that under was desktop support. And I think this was a rolling 3 months, just to give you some background, a specific customer set, rolling 3 months of how many records we received for that. And that's how large of a percentage our desktop support was for the specific customer set. So when someone says, what are those? They want to know more detail. They want to know more information. And that leads to what I would say is some interesting and desperate measures. And if we move forward here to the next one is people start talking about, well, I want to know more about it. And then you start to find out how lacking you are, because in that large group, I don't know if that's someone's requesting something, although I see the word request quite a bit. I don't know if it's dealing with software or hardware. We find that maybe we didn't categorize our information as the best we possibly could. And so there's a room for growth. So we know we had something good. It's not meeting the need anymore. We have an opportunity to mature. And what you're seeing here is this desperate measure that I did when someone asked me, Steve, can you give me more information? I said, well, I'll see what I can do. So I took a series of records for the rolling 3 months and took them into Excel, wrote a macro, and tried to do a word count on the short description of each record to see if I could find where some of these things are. And so what you're seeing on this one is the word computer, equipment, workstation, desktop. Some of these would be very much considered synonyms. I can see there's a lot there about privileges. Administrative is showing up. And as I'm looking at this, it's not telling me enough. And we'll go to my last slide here. Because if I have all of those desktop support tickets, and I have an incidence for them, and they're going to keep coming, that's not going to stop, I need to find a way to get in front of them. I want to find a way to not just be reactive, but how do I get proactive? And when someone asks a question like, well, what are all those records? I need to figure out what they are, can they be prevented, and how can we do that? And so this comes down to what I need out of our record and a recording system and the categorization. And so one of the things, this is actually a current project, we'll release it, I believe, next Friday. And that next part is associating incidents with CIs. So if somebody were to say, I'm having a problem with my computer, we want to be able to say, oh, what's the record that we associate that with? Great part about doing something like this is I can report on issues with specific models. I can see if that specific CI record is going to be a repeat offender, and maybe it's just time to issue a new desktop so we can prevent future incidents. There's some great things that we can get out of associating it with those CIs. So that's a step that we'll take here soon. Again, a week from this Friday, so next Friday that we'll be rolling out. The other part is when I talked about that descriptor on the very first page, we had the very first slide, we had a lot of descriptors that were just very generalized. And what I found is one of those other service providers said, is there any way that I can track a record as being this thing or something more specific, not just the service, but dig deeper into that service? And we did it for them. And we realized that, you know what, we can take advantage of this too. So not only could I say that I have this problem with this CI, with this particular piece of equipment, but that was a hardware issue, a peripheral issue, a software issue, a configuration, an install that maybe we needed to do. So we associate the CI, then we can start digging down into what exactly is that gigantic piece of the pie that we're seeing. We can find out more information that we need to know so that we can provide a better service as we move forward. So we want to provide meaningful options. And there's a lot of times where you look at a drop-down list and you're like, what does all this mean? And does it actually serve any importance? And it may not. And that may be time to switch it up. Then the other part too, and I like that this was mentioned as well, training is massively important, that we teach people to actually utilize the options that are there and to utilize the correct options. And so some of that is going to deal with buy-in. Anytime you make a modification, I'm certain that others can speak to this, is that you want to make certain that people buy in down to from the highest to the very lowest levels of your organization to actually commit to doing these things, and that there is a reason for it, and there's a growth opportunity for that. And so one of the things that we looked at, especially with associating CIs with incidents, so we can especially get more data, was to how do I make this really easy for people to do? How can I allow the customer from a customer service standpoint associate that CI without them ever really knowing that they're doing it? How do I allow for somebody who's on that first line to be able to associate it without ever really knowing that they're doing it? And so we find that the simpler we make it, the simpler we make the solution, the better buy-in we get, the more data that we get over a period of time. And so those were some of what the issues that we needed to solve so that we could get this better categorization, this incident, this specific piece of equipment, and these specific issues. The other thing that we really like on this is that when we start associating the CI with the incident down the line, what we're looking for is maybe we need to speak with our vendors about the equipment. If we're noticing that various models are having an issue, maybe we need to go speak with whoever the vendor is for that model about what we're receiving, and kind of give us a little bit more power when we're talking to them, saying, we've had these trends, we'd like to get away from that. What can we do? What are some options that might be available to us? So you can also get a little bit more kind of a negotiation power with your vendor. Just on this last piece, as I'm looking through it, so some of the different pieces that it would definitely want to talk to about and review is that you want to see what you can report on, right? So I look at the report that I provided, and I see that big thing of desktop support, but I didn't have enough there to do anything actionable with it. And there's always that saying, like, if you can't report on it, why are you doing it? And there was a situation where we can't report on what all those different pieces are, what all those incidents may have been. So why are we recording it? What can we do to actually make that gigantic piece of records actually more useful? And you're going to have to define what is going to be beneficial to your environment, not just now, but then as you move forward, reinvestigate your process and figure out what you can do to mature that and get better. So that's all I have. I'll go ahead and turn it over. I believe it's to Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So we're going to be moving into the QA portion here in the next few minutes. I do just want to call attention. We will be making these slides available. We do have some additional resources on topics around service catalog, as well as the IT service management constituent groups EDUCAUSE page and their wiki. There's a large amount of resources there available around not only the topic of incident categorization, but all sorts of other things really focused on service management. The support services community group also has a webpage hosted off of EDUCAUSE website. So if you do want to learn more about our group, you'll be able to go to those web pages there. We do have a link for feedback. And so I'll go ahead and put this up once we get toward the end of the QA, but I do just want to call your attention to that now. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we'll move into the QA portion. So first, looks like we've got an answer here, or a question rather. How is incident categorization different from service categorization via the service catalog?
So I'll start. This is Kent Carpenter from UC Merced. So in the incident form, you're categorizing the type of issue. So we're talking a difference between an incident or a problem, right, versus a request. And a service catalog is a request versus a incident, right? Something's broken versus I need something. So incident categorization is, depending on what's broken, that's what you're categorizing it around, right? A broken keyboard, the Wi-Fi is down on campus. Those are incidents, right? So that's where you're doing the category type an item, like in my situation, around that incident. Okay. Now with the service categorization, the service catalog, everybody should hopefully has, or thinking about building a catalog within their IT website, right? I need a port activated. I need a distribution list created for my new foundation, right? Those are needs. So each one of those actually should be its own service. It should be its own form. And I know in ServiceNow, we can track those separately from incidents. So incidents, it's a form. All incidents are captured in that form. That's why we categorize it. In the service catalog, each service has its own form, and that's how we kind of track the activities from the service catalog. And I don't know if Mike or Steve, if you have any other perspectives on that one.
This is Steve. For us, and I think it's the same thing. It's like when you have your incident form, you have your service form. But one of the biggest pieces is that we're categorizing. How do I say this? The incident gets tracked back to the service. So when we look at a service over a long period of time, we've defined what that service is, who are the customers, what's the SLAs on that service. So we've got all that information specifically about the service. And then from there, we track the incidents to that service. So yeah, they're separate forms, they're separate entities or separate pieces, separate records. But over a period of time, we want to track that back. Again, all these different instances to the service, but we don't track, I'm going to take this a little bit further too. We don't just track incidents to that service, we're tracking changes to that service, we're tracking improvement efforts to that service, request items to that service. So we define the service and the support groups that go with it and everything about that service, and we're tracking all these different things back to that service so that we can see what's been done or what's happened to that service over a period of time. Even customer satisfaction surveys for incidents and requests, and we're tracking back to that service to see how that service is rated inside of the university. So I hope that helps. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. Next question. Are any of you utilizing the eCar service categories as a baseline for incident request changes, etc., and alignment to service or service offerings? Might they help in this process?
This is Kent from UC Merced. I didn't know about the document that was out there until I joined this group, so I probably could have taken some advantages of it.
Well, this is Mike. Yeah, we've looked at eCar a couple times. There's some good information in there. I would highly suggest going and taking a look for those of you that are on that have not. But again, just to kind of underline what I started out with, there's no real cookie cutter solution that I found that works for everybody. So I think of ITSM or IT incident management or whatever is kind of like a salad bar. You know, everybody's done it. Do your research, find out, you know, what they have going that's working, and kind of take from it and make it your own. You know, that's kind of the whole spirit of EDUCAUSE.
Totally agree. Thanks, Mike and Kent. Okay, this question is specific for Kent. Kent, you said you were cutting over to new categories soon. During QA, could you share the current categories and the new categories with us?
So I shared my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So if you want a copy of this, email me. I'll send it out to you. But this, I'm going to share it as the example. This is what we did. We're going live this Friday. The way I broke it down, and again, this is very simplistic for where we are as an organization here, and what I need. It will improve where we're already at. Someday when we do CMDB, I know I'm going to rip all this out and redo it the whole thing. But so you can see the category. You know, you can see we have network here, and then I defined the subcategory as switch. We have the different SIDs. We have a catnet SID and a guest and an auth. And I don't see Jerome. It's probably up there somewhere. It's up on top. So we define the different services that we provide, and then in working with the network team, you know, I really kind of let them define what are the issues under each one of those the categories that they've defined. So you can see they've, you know, connection issue, login issue, failure of some sort. We look down at security. We got research computing, and we got some security. You can see security. It could be a DNS issue. You know, it could be a configuration issue that was put in a DNS server that was incorrect. We're implementing two-factor authentication using Duo, so that's going live as we speak. But that kind of gives you a sample of what we're doing. And then the assignment group is over here. So the idea with this is, you know, if I do security Duo, having an issue that the service desk cannot resolve, so they open the ticket, they're working with the customer, that's how they populate it. And in the assignment group, it's going to say IT security. But if the service desk actually happens to close the ticket, then they're going to change the assignment group to the service desk, so they get credit for the closing of the ticket. But that will give them some guidance and some direction on where to assign it if they need to escalate it up to a tier 2, tier 3 team. Okay. And then we have all the applications up here. Again, this was the 80-20 role that we assigned. The model I went after. I didn't want to go indefinite with all the different applications that are all over the place. Some of them are so obscure we'll never see anything with them. But you know, if I had to, you know, if it was a pause application, we know that anytime that we have an issue with it, we'd assign it to the identity access management team. Okay, so that's a sample of what we did. If you guys want a copy of it, just email me separately outside of this meeting, and I'd be more than happy to share it with you.
Thanks so much, Kent.
Yeah, thank you.
Did anyone else have anything on that they wanted to share before we move on? Okay, looks like we had a follow-up here. Looks like this is from Todd Thomas. Todd asks, they're looking to use IT services as categories, but didn't see this mentioned. Any thoughts or considerations around this?
Did we? I'm not sure if we answered that in the service catalog and the services. But in our model, the incident form is separate from request ticketing. So they're completely separate. I know some systems out there, Sherwell, Remedy, I don't know if Remedy got away from that, where you can capture an incident or request in the same form. But I think some systems are getting away from that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Cool, yeah, and we do have the chat pod open, so we can also use that there if we need to. The next question we have here is from George Anglin. How do you define first call resolution?
This is Steve Shanks. For us, of course, that's when it hits the service desk if they're the first person that gets it. But we also have something on a lot of our records, which is reassignment count. So based on that reassignment count, it actually tracks every time that's been assigned to a different group. If it has, then we wouldn't consider it first call resolution. If it went to a different group or if it was escalated to a different group, we wouldn't call that first call resolution. So anything that's done without being reassigned or to a different group, that functional escalation, we would consider that to be a first call resolution.
And how you capture that is you can watch for these reassignments. I've also applied something very simple where we just have a button and a click that says first call resolution, and the service desk technician would click it. You know, it's an honor based, but that was something simple that we did. The other thing that we tracked, you know, you have the first call resolution. I took the call, I resolved it, done. Right. There's other things, you know, again based on your organization. Maybe I got the call, and I had to escalate it to another team in the same call. Right. So it's not a first call resolution, it's more of a first call with handoffs, but it was still resolved in a first call. So sometimes some organizations want to track that as well. The danger and what you want to reduce is how many times you have to contact the customer back and forth. That's outside of a first call resolution.
Okay, very good. Moving on here. This question's from Jessica Hinkle. How do you capture customer perceived categorization? So an example there is my email doesn't work, while also capturing the technical issue, authentication services are down.
Yeah, I can fill this one for us. So we're talking about two different things here, especially if you're practicing problem management. If you're doing everything in incidents, the capturing the technical issue or what's going on that's causing her email not to work would be a separate parent ticket. Her ticket would be attached to that parent record that would basically, you know, go over what she is reporting, and then the root cause would be in that master ticket, showing, hey, you know, she was affected, her email doesn't work because the authentication servers are down. So in that parent-child relationship, the way it's set up in our system is once that parent is resolved, and then all those children get the same information, it's resolved as well.
And then I'm going to add on to that from a different perspective. You know, it's a customer knows what they know and what they're perceiving, right? My computer's broken, right? Hopefully there's some chuckles out there, but that's, you know, we get that, right? but sometimes I can't log into XYZ system, right? And that's what the customer tells us, and that's what we initially triage. And you want to capture that from a customer perspective. In our ticketing system, and what I kind of like more than anything is, once you go through all the troubleshooting, then you actually get to the root cause and what actually is happening. So when you're closing, so you leave the initial description alone, right? But then once you get to the actual root cause and what it took to resolve it, then you want to capture that, because both of those elements of data are valuable in different ways, right? So again, if you go start looking back at all your incident tickets and seeing themes, customer can't log into, whatever system, and then you can look at what the actual cause is. Then you can go and adjust how you're presenting the application or whatever, and adjust that service or application so it's easier for them to use, or if they do get stuck, you have self-help options on the screen. So, I mean, again, the bottom line is both those pieces of data are active. Initial symptoms that the customer is reporting, the actual root cause, both very valuable.
Bruce, this is Steve. I just wanted to definitely kind of reiterate what these gentlemen are saying, because it's some really great things that are going on there. Like, for example, you have an incident that went wrong, and one of the things we do is we open the incident to the impacted service. But then on top of that, we'll have a parent incident. And Mike, you're doing the same thing we're doing, where if that parent incident closes, it's going to go ahead and filter on down. But for, let's say it is authentication services. Well, that's going to impact a lot of services. So the authentication services might go ahead, we might have customers of that. So maybe I can't log into our online classroom, and I can't turn in my homework, or I can't get into the system, student information system, because of this. So each one of those will have their incidents, because that's the impacted one. But then later on, we might find, and we have outages for all those that are created, but we might dig in and start seeing that the problem or root cause, and for us, we create a problem record. The problem or root cause may have been something entirely different, whether it's going to be a server that went down, maybe load balancing issue. So this other service is what caused it, but we can make those incidents all children of that problem record, and say that that's what caused all of these different pieces. I'm going to throw something else out there too, is we worked a lot with our marketing communications team to really talk to them about maybe what perceived wording should be shown to our customers as well. So definitely we'll do our due diligence behind the scene, but also to engage IT, we really wanted to make certain that we weren't speaking what we called ITIL-E's, because there's a lot of terms that people won't understand. It's email to them, but for us, it's university email service. What does that mean? So how do we do that? How do we make an interface that will allow for them to integrate or to interact with us? So that was just a couple of things I know that we've dealt with here.
Yeah, we've dealt with some of the same stuff here at Penn State. So it looks like we're coming up. We might have time to answer just one more question here. So this one comes from Sean Stockberger. Many university staff resist the ticket process entirely, and they're very vocal about every single field or option they have to complete. They also use a lot of student employees who enter tickets on behalf of a customer. How do you convince staff that it's worth their time to understand and utilize these additional fields correctly?
Yeah, let me take a crack at this one real quick. So I just went through this in change management, and of course I've straddled healthcare, corporate, and higher ed, so I know how kind of all three work. And in higher ed, no one will do anything because I said so. Because I told you to do something, they're not going to do it. So you really have to get in there and show them the benefit to them personally. How is this personally going to affect their job? Usually it's through reporting and automation. We're going to be able to take this off of you. We're going to be able to, streamline this for you, but you have to give us the information to do
that. Sherry Usimer said, this is Kent. We have a very simple form to have them fill out to get their incident in. My perspective, to keep it as simple as possible, just get the information that we really need, then we can investigate it after the fact. The other thing is avoid having a lot of mandatory fields on form because they will resist that.
We took some, Steve Shanks, we took some opportunities to try to autofill as much as possible. So when we're looking at, once we get them to fill out the form, and by the way, that isn't always easy. We're still trying to figure out how do we have people do that. But when we actually have somebody filling out the form and to get them to complete it, we try to take everything we know about our users and autofill it for them. So if you put in their username, it autofills email address, phone number, department. If you put in, you don't have to put in service provider and category, but if you know the service, because there's repeat offenders and services, it'll backfill that information. Once you put in the service, if you need to know how to escalate that to the proper functional level, there's a button that'll automatically say, oh, this is the support group associated with that. So one of the things that we've tried to do is, as much as possible for the people who are like students and filling that information out, is to make it as quick and as easy as we possibly can. The other thing that we're implementing with the CIs here in the coming weeks is we were trying to find really good user interfaces. So we have a quick find for a user, and if you type in their username, it tells you all kinds of stuff about them right away, and then you can actually hit show assets or CIs, and then select which one it's about, and then create your record from there. So there's a lot of things that we had to do on the user interface to make it simpler so that they wouldn't complain about, oh, I don't want to fill in that field and this field and that field, because we hear that a lot. So that's been some of what we did from a tooling perspective to try to address some of those issues.
Fantastic. Well, thanks everyone. It looks like we're just at the top of the hour here, so that's all the time we have for questions at this point. This concludes our panel discussion. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the panelists for sharing their time and insights with us today. We've been kind enough to share a lot of their contact information with us, so we'll post that up in the notes here. We're always looking for fresh ideas. If you have an idea for a webinar and have a desire to present or meet, you can go to the ITSM EDUCAUSE page that will be in the we had it in the resources there. We'll go ahead and get that shared out to the list. We'll be sending an email after we conclude here. And yeah, in that will also be a link to the recording and the slides, and we'll have all the information there. So it looks like we did have some folks asking if Kent could also share his categorization. So we'll be sure to include those there. So with that, thanks everyone. We appreciate your time, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.